Yes, and it seems that we are already live. Thank you very much for everyone who's joining this session. Aujourd'hui, on va parler sur comment, comme développeur, on peut OK, c'est comme ça, ouais. Comme je disais, là, aujourd'hui, on va parler comment, comme développeur, on peut créer des applications mobiles pour tout le monde. Ça veut dire que ça serait possible de faire utiliser sur différentes personnes. Am, o también vamos a hablar del día de hoy de esas técnicas, de cómo es posible de que una aplicación móvil pueda utilizarse en diferentes locations, localidades, sea diferentes idiomas, sea diferentes países, porque sabemos que en un país pueden haber existen personas que hablan diferentes idiomas. Y so if you couldn't understand what I was saying before, I just wanted to show you that that is exactly how your users feel when they're using your applications, and we do not provide uh, languages for we do not support the languages. So my name is Andres Pineda. I'm a senior developer at Shopify, and today we're going to be talking about how we can build mobile applications for global audience. So you don't have to feel how you felt at the beginning of the presentation. um, a little bit of myself. I'm a collaborator in different communities across Latin America and other places like United States, also here in Canada. I love everything that has to deal with community, and that's why this presentation is very important for me. Because as a community member, I understand the importance of making available content for everyone in the community. So the agenda for today, it's gonna be very straight to the point. So we're gonna look at the problem, what the problem that we have when we do not make our application accessible for all the developers, for all the users. Uh, uh, Talking about the difference between internationalization and localization, uh, globalization for mobile apps. What tools do we have in order to make this possible? Internalization done right, based on my experience. Not saying that there's not other way of doing it right, but based on the experience that I had on the past. And most important part is talking about the most important part of the internationalization. And so let's start with the story. Once upon a time, there was this application that could have done better. It was this grocery store that decided to allow their customers to buy online. Basically, there was a very well-known grocery store in the Caribbean, and they said, okay, we need to allow customers to buy online without having to move to our stores. That was all right. It was working fine, perfectly, because they even created mobile applications for those for that store, and they were so nice that they added both clients for iOS and Android. But there was a problem. Everything was working perfect, or almost perfect, until um, the world was hit by that pandemic. And what happened with the pandemic? The pandemic brought a lot of issues. One of those, uh, for this specific application, was the fact that they didn't expect that many users. So they had a performance problems. They had also problems with distributions and many other problems. But there was one specific problems that it was really hard to solve. All the other problems that we were talking before, they were able to solve, but like the performance, most of the issues in the performance were in the back end. So it was matter of making sure that the backend had all the resources they needed, and UI UX issues, like they noticed that the application was not very intuitive when it was started being used in mass. So they chip a few of the versions of the application with a more with a better user experience. But this specific problem that they encounter Can you guess which one it was? So yeah, probably you know. Handling multiple languages, also known as internationalization and localization. When they created this application, remember in the Caribbean before COVID, they thought they had the idea that only users in their only people in their country are going to be using this application, and that application was built only to support Spanish. And then they later realized that there were many other users that also lived in the country. They wanted to use the application, but they couldn't. We're talking about a time when we were all in lockdown, and only a few people were able to go outside, were allowed, and others were not allowed, and others were not able to. And so they realized that there was this problem, and they wanted to fix it, but it was really hard because they didn't take into account internationalization. So, in order to make an application speak different languages, we need to talk about internationalization and localization. These two words, even though they every time when we talk about one, we need to mention the other. They are not the same. Most people get confused about the meaning of these two, but each one of those represent a very important step in the when we want to bring multiple languages into our mobile apps. For sure, internationalization is also known as I18N, and localization is also known as a L. That's not L, even though it looks like an I. Um, so, what is internationalization? So, in short, this is what's even copied from Wikipedia. In short, internationalization is that process that we do when we're designing our app. So, all the plumbing that we need to do to make sure that later on our application can be localized to different languages and regions. And that means putting in place all the parts that later would allow that the localization can happen. So, and localization is basically the process of adapting the application that we already international make it possible to internationalize, um, to a specific regions by translating text and adding the different locales and adding different image. But very important is that localize is more than just translating and screen. So it's not only that when we want to localize an application, we will only translate all the text, and then the application with just be localized. There's a few other things that we need to take into account when we are working with localization, and those are like the unit of measures, which are different from country to country. For example, it's the United States use the Fahrenheit. Is your application, for example, is working with the weather, when I think the rest of the world uses a Celsius. The same happens with the currency. If you by any chance are using a hard-coded string for the currency, or you are not localizing properly your currency, you might be showing a currency that is not the correct one for the people that is looking at your application. uh, as the same, we have number format, where whether in France and they use, and other places in Europe, they use the a different style than the one the some of the countries use, and date and time. So there are many other things that we need to take into account when we're talking about localization. And um, but if we want to support multiple locales in a mobile app, how can we do it? Well, both platform, iOS and Android, support localization and internationalization, and it provides the tools required to support it. So basically, we don't need an external tool in order to support localization. In the case of iOS, what we're seeing right now is an Xcode, which is the editor for iOS, and basically we are just telling this application, Grocery for All, that we want to support all the languages. The base language is going to be the language that your IDE is. So in my case, the base language is English, because my computer is in English. And what we just did is that we added support for French and Spanish. This process, we create two files. That those files are called the dot strings files, and there is where we will be able to use the it's like a dictionary, right? And there we're going to be able to specify the key, which is the string that is what is the way that we're going to be looking for the value, and the value, which is a string that is going to be localized. So the value that the users are going to be seeing on the screen. So that way we want to have three files, and three is going to be one for each language. And the process is that we're going to be adding the key in English, whatever is your base language, and then we will going to export the other two in order so that another team or a company will do the translation into the language. In the case of Android, things are a little bit different because on Android, you're gonna be able to open an editor, and from there you can specify almost same step as iOS, but there's a difference, and I would tell you in a moment. You're gonna be able to specify all those other locales that your application is gonna support, and this is going to create the same as iOS, three different files: one for Spanish, one for French, and another one for which is the base. In this case, is for English. Um, the base, even though it is English, it is good for you to know the way it works. This is just as for you to know is that if you don't specify locale for the language, let's say that your application is loaded is loaded into English, into Spanish, and you only support English. What is going to happen is that it's gonna default to the default language, which is English. Yeah, and I don't know why. I'm getting the message that the presentation is blur, and my screen looks fine. Could it be changing? I'm change. Let me see if I can change my. Uh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can change my resolution. Probably is the resolution. Let me change the resolution. Wait a second. I'm sorry. Didn't notice until now. Minus keep changes. Let's see now. Please give me the feedback now. I just Can you please max the percent? It still looks blurry, and honestly, I don't. Let me stop screen. Let me share it again. Can you please again add the presentation to the stream? Um, Still, and I don't know why. Yeah, let's do it this way. Yeah, so you don't if we don't max it out, we probably doesn't look that bad. I'm sorry for this. I tested this before, and I don't think it is my internet, but let's see how we can do it. And I'm sorry. Yeah, it looks blurry. I'm seeing on my stream that it's also it looks blurry. I'm really sorry for this again. But let's I can share these slides later with anyone that is here watching the live session, and you can get the slides from it. You can get the information from the slides. So I was saying, so in Android it's a bit different, but what Android support that iOS do not support is that in the case of iOS, you're gonna be localizing the streams that are put in the code, Also, the streams that are part of the storyboards if you're using UI Kit. In the case of Swift UI, you have access to a new key, which is localized string keys. This will allow you to then extract part of the stream copies that you're using in your application. And for iOS, you also have the string dict, which is something that is the way that iOS supports the dealing with plurals. We're gonna see that later in one of the slides. So, but for Android, you have access to also localize your images, meaning that if you have an application that have images and text part of the image, you can provide with different image for each individual language. That can be a problem though, because of the more languages that you support, the more images that you will have, the more copies of the image that you will have. So, in order to avoid having a problem with the application size, one of my suggestions is that instead of making the image and the text to blend them together, you can just use the image and use the test. You're gonna merge those two inside the application. That way, you're gonna have a single image, and you can have a different copies of the test that is gonna be localized for the language. That way, you don't have to deal. If you need to have different images, another resource, another way to deal with that is by keeping the image in a server and bring in the image whenever you need it based on the locale that the user has on the device. Um, but uh, talking about iOS, talking about Android, but we know that these days there are other cross-platform frameworks that also needs to be localized. They create native applications. Name it can be Flutter, React Native, Uno Platform, Xamarin Forms, which recently was renamed as a Maui. uh, in the case, if you're working with one of those frameworks, you will have access through the framework to libraries and or utilities to to complete the localization of your application. I'm sorry, my brain is being a little bit sick. To complete the localization of your application, if it is external, for example, in the case of Uno Platform, which is a framework that allows you to build iOS and Android applications using C Sharp and SAML. The way that they work with localization, that they allow you to support different languages, is by using the same a dictionary, but uh, the benefit of this one, and might be the same for other cross-platform frameworks, is that you are able to keep the resources in a single file, meaning that both your Android and iOS applications are going to be consuming from this file. Um, how we can uh, make internationalization be right? How can we make it in a way that we don't have headaches later during the development of our the application, or whenever we want to support? Because remember that internationalization is just the first step before localization. You don't need to make your applications translated into different languages until you actually need it. But keep in mind that you need to plan ahead um, before you need it. So planning ahead, internationalization means that you're gonna separate the content from the code, meaning do not allow any hard code string be part of your code. That is, use the resources that we just saw, that every platform, being native or cross-platform, uh, gives you images. The same as I mentioned before, be sure to do not include images that have the test, so that way you can reuse the same image in different locales. Audio and video. For audio and video, a suggestion would be to keep it on the server. And for video, if you really need to use the same video, another way to say, I mean, if you need to have the video as part of your bundle, of your application bundle, one way to fix this is by making subtitles and all captions. That way, other folks are gonna be able look at the video and read the subtitles that you're going to be providing with it. They format, do not use format like hard coded format. Do not format your values and your currency. Instead, use the language, the framework and language specific utility tools that will help you to format your values based on the locale of that what the user has available. Something very important is that avoid using fixed size for text boxes or for anything displaying a test. Why is this? Each language is going to have a different size of length. When you translate them, you don't run into troubles that you don't have enough space to put the value of the test. You're gonna have situations where a test is longer in Spanish or a test is shorter in any other language. Let's say in French. Translation services. Use translation services. I encourage you to do not try to translate the application yourself. Why? Unless you are a solo developer and you're building an application to use you and your friends, this application will be used by users that they expect to have uh, a good user experience. And the 3 semester that you did in Spanish or the year that you lived in France might not give you all the context required in order to do a good translation for an application. Remember that your users will be looking to have a good experience. Um, Finally, I would say make internationalization part of your CI and your linter and your IDE. I'm sorry. That means that add controls so that from the get-go you are able to prevent adding controls and rules. So from the get-go, you can prevent adding hard-coded strings as part of your source code. This way, whenever you want, or the business require to have support of your application in other languages, the only thing that you will need to do is just finishing doing the translation. Remember that internationalization is important because we're building for everyone or almost everyone. Because it's true that we will not be able to translate an application for every single language, but every language that we support in our application is a set of users that are going to be able to use the application. And remember that internationalization is part of accessibility. And as it is important for us to plan the internationalization from the beginning, as we do with accessibility. Remember, accessibility means make the application accessible for everyone. So almost the same slide that we saw before. This is what accessibility is looking for. And now that we're talking accessibility, I want to mention that part of your internationalization and or localization, you're going to have to also translate the streams that are part of your screen readers. This is if you have made accessibility of your application, um, if you have made applications that to make us accessible, you have seen that use some keys that are the ones that are used for the screen reader to show the user. Don't forget to do that because people that have problems, vision problems, we will be able to listen what the screen reader said. I'm sorry for the promise that we have, but this is all I have to share for today. Make your applications available for everyone and keep your safe. Thank you very much and on se voir. Hablamos luego.